Excellencies, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the Clingendael Institute. My name is Bob Deen. I am the coordinator of the Russia and Eastern Europe Center, and actually since this month I'm also the head of the security unit of the Clingendael Institute. So what better topic than to begin my new role than a conference that brings these two questions together, security and Eastern Europe. A conference on foreign interference, manipulation of information, and Russian strategic narratives. An incredibly complex topic, and I'm very grateful to my colleagues who've put together a conference on this very, very actual topic right now, as the Netherlands is gearing up for an election campaign that will be one of the most, how to describe it, complex and turbulent, maybe, in our country's recent political history. In a time when trust in our institutions is at a worryingly low level, and this distrust among the population can very easily be exploited and aggravated by external actors. It's certainly a topic to be worried about and a topic to talk about, because we face rather difficult dilemmas in the run-up to these elections, but also broader in the fight against the manipulation of information. To start with, what exactly is disinformation? It's a very difficult concept to grasp. You could just say it's lies. That would be the easiest way. But what is disinformation and what is just a different opinion? And then who gets to interpret this? Who's actually the judge about whether or not something is disinformation? How do you balance the legitimate need of states to protect their national security and to avoid social unrest with the need for freedom of expression and freedom of the media that we are so proud of as democracies? What exactly is propaganda and what is just strategic communication? And when does this become a disinformation narrative? Now, whom to discuss this better with than with experts from Ukraine, the country that has for many years, long before the full-scale invasion, and I would argue even long before 2014, been at the front line of Russian strategic narratives, disinformation, propaganda. This has been going on for many years. I see the ambassador of Estonia here, who knows very well what happened around the Bronze Soldier case, the disinformation that you got in Estonia, maybe the first time that we also saw this combined with a large-scale cyber campaign. These are very, very serious threats to our national security, and they also threaten our societal stability and trust in institutions. So we need this type of conversations, and we need them often, because next year there will be new techniques that we haven't even been able to anticipate. And that's why we're very grateful that we have a broad range of experts present, from Ukraine, from North Macedonia, from Sweden, from the European External Action Service, the Stratcom East Task Force. We have a really good set of experts for you to debate these questions. But now, without further ado, allow me to give the floor to the recently appointed ambassador of Ukraine to the Netherlands, Ambassador Karasevych, who has a long and distinguished career in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine and in the presidential administration. Excellency, you have a lot of expertise on international law, so some of these questions will undoubtedly not be new to you, and we're very grateful also that the embassy helped us to identify experts and that you want to share your experiences with us. Excellency, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, dear Bob. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow diplomats, ambassadors, it's really an honor for me to be here with you and to open this conference. And first of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to everyone who contributed to the organization of this important event. Thank you. I would like to start my intervention with one quote, quite an interesting one, and I'll quote. Russian propaganda is not a novelty of recent years. It goes back to Soviet times. Its goal is not only to spread its own narrative, but also to weaken the existing democratic narratives in Western societies. Since Russia cannot offer its own new grand narrative, it's trying to prove that Western narratives are unreliable. The problem of Russian propaganda is broader than just fake news. Russia does not stop at producing fake news. It uses a specific discourse that has a certain semi-militaristic color and is aimed at winning the war. This quote is from one book, Words and Wars, Ukraine and its War Against Russian Propaganda. It is an overview of the work of Ukrainian experts. It was produced by one independent Ukrainian NGO, and it goes back to 2017, basically. It's from my previous life when I worked in the Council of Europe. And at that time, this NGO actually brought this research to the Council of Europe, to the headquarters. They had an interesting presentation over there, and I was really impressed with that. I was so impressed that when I just got an invitation to this event, I just recalled, I found that book in my library, and I looked through it once more and took this quote. Unfortunately, today it fits our reality as well as it was 6 years ago. And our discourse, our joining together also proves that this issue in our hands, disinformation and foreign interference, has far-reaching consequences for peace and stability. We all know that disinformation and foreign interference were instrumental and still are during the preparation of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. In this regard, I do remember that at that presentation I mentioned in the Council of Europe, Ukrainian experts also informed the audience about quite an interesting fact, that Russian media, top media at that time, they were literally proposing one narrative, and that narrative was regarding dehumanization of the other peoples, of the Ukrainian people and of the Western people. And it was quite a shock for a lot of present in the room, because it was quite obvious for everyone who is in the topic that when a state is talking about dehumanization, it is actually preparing for a war against that particular nations. And now we all know that basically it was exactly the case for the Russian Federation. And as the Russian aggression continues, it continued to conduct active actions in the information sphere as well. The consequences of such massive information campaigns to spread propaganda and fake news are felt not only by Ukraine at the moment, but also by the European Union countries and by the whole world in general. Systematic efforts of Ukrainian state institutions in recent years helped our state to significantly reduce Russia's ability to spread its destructive narratives in our country, on the territory of Ukraine. And it was actually facilitated by a number of policies and strategies, including quite strong moves like, for example, a restriction on broadcasting of Russian media and introduction of economic sanctions against key propaganda actors. Also, another important element was, of course, complex work that was done by Ukraine to develop our institutional component of the state mechanism for countering disinformation. I mean, in particular, the Center for Strategic Communications, Information Security under the Ministry of Culture and Information, and the Center for Countering Disinformation, and the Military Media Center. All of them work quite effectively in Ukraine, but I do believe that just a single one of the mentioned tools, isolated from all another, cannot bring positive results in our response to Russian propaganda. What is needed is a comprehensive strategy, a strategy that requires proper and consistent evaluation of its effectiveness, and that will constantly explore additional measures to reinforce its impact in the sphere not only of disinformation per se, but also in the directly interlinked spheres, like, for example, cybersecurity. And when we think about such strategies, I believe that it is necessary for us to consider the following basic principles. First of all, unity and coordination. We must stand together in a united front, reinforcing our commitment to the principles of international law and preservation of sovereignty. And it requires quite a lot of joint, coordinated, and combined work. Secondly, it's information resilience. We must invest in strengthening the resilience of our societies through disinformation and propaganda. We are to educate our people, it's just what Bob talked about, and they are to learn what threats are posed by manipulation. And they are to be taught media literacy. Thirdly, assistance. We must not forget that actually there is quite a huge human toll of the war, including of the war of propaganda. And that is why providing aid to those in need and to those affected is important. And the fourth, international legal regulations, the development and reinforcement of the respective legal norms governing, for example, cyber operations and information warfare are crucial to deterring future interference, first of all. Dear colleagues, without any doubts, addressing foreign interference, manipulation, and the strategic narratives employed by terrorist state on the international stage is a complex and multifaceted challenge. That is why it is even more important for me to be here a part of this event, where you, like-minded experts, coming together to commit to the pursuit of a more secure and stable world, where respect for international law and the sovereignty of nations is upheld. And I would like once more to thank everyone present here, to thank the Netherlands, to thank the Clingendael Institute, and to thank all our partners for the assistance you are providing Ukraine and, of course, in the area of countering the Russian propaganda. And I am convinced that combining our efforts will be the key to effectively countering information threats of both regional and global nature. I do thank you, and I wish you, everyone, really productive work today. Thank you.
So I noticed myself in the program for 15 minutes closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't prepare 15 minutes worth of closing remarks, so you have to bear with me as I try to summarize this entire day. And I promise I'm not going to take 15 minutes because you're entitled to a drink, and this conversation was way too good to encroach upon with my time. So let me give it a quick sort of run over. What were the things we heard from the three Ukrainian speakers that we should have really, really heard? Ambassador Karasevych pointed it out. This is part of a war, and you need a comprehensive strategy and a coordinated strategy to defend yourself. Ksenia and Denis, I think you were entirely in agreement with that. This is an actual war. And the key word that was coming back from all your statements was threat awareness. And you've helped a lot to give us this threat awareness here. Denis, you of course pointed out, don't stop to analyze, don't sit around, actually get moving, do things. But then I think it was very important, Ksenia, that you pointed out, not necessarily do states always have to do things. There are bottom-up initiatives, and I think the question about the group-based, I think you had a much better word for it than I did, the collective-based, the spontaneous way of debunking narratives, that can actually be done by others. I think it's ill-founded if we think that a ministry can sit around and turn itself into a ministry of truth and actually do the debunking. There's others that are much better at it. Which brings me to the second point, and Piotr, I think, no, he's still here. Okay, he's just moved. You're just doing that to confuse me. You pointed out this Western and this Eastern perspective, and it sort of stuck with me, that, and also the contrast maybe between what Denis was saying and what my colleague Kuhn was saying. With the Ukrainians, of course, fighting a war, you have a state of emergency. It's an imminent security threat. This information could really risk lives. Here in the Netherlands, with our long tradition of, civil liberties and freedoms and squabbling about everything, I wouldn't be as comfortable giving our intelligence services the same competencies as the SBU has at this moment in Ukraine. And I think that is fine. I don't think this balance has to be the same for every country. I think you can adjust it based on your cultural context, your historical context, your threat perception, but as long as you take it seriously and you do something about it in your own way. And I think that's why I was very happy Raimonda was there to brief us about what the EU is doing, because I think, of course, nobody would like Brussels to come in and be the new center of gravity that determines what the truth is. But you are equipping us with tools. You're equipping us with a toolbox, and we should use this toolbox because no matter how adverse I might be that the state will come in and determine what is disinformation and what is just, another opinion, there is a role for the state because these are state actors doing things. And Kuhn pointed it out, it's not just Russia. Others are learning. I was actually surprised, Kuhn, to hear you use the word dark PR, because I remember that from in Russian Chorny PR. That's been around forever, which is an indicative term. That goes back Soviet times, active measures and everything. Others are learning from Russia. So the best we can do is learn like crazy from Ukrainians. Because I think that is the big advantage we have now. Ksenia, I can listen to you all day describing these things, what you're doing. And I think you should go around and help Dutch government ministries and enlighten us what you're doing. I think I'm going to conclude with the last thing. I was marking up metaphors. It's something I like to do during a conference to entertain myself. The ones that happened most often were silver bullets, toolboxes, and the gym. And I'm going to string them all together because that's what I do. So I want to fact check the silver bullet. Where did that come from? Do you know where that came from? That's from old Swedish folklore. Mikael, I don't know if you can still hear me, about the idea that you can hurt monsters with silver bullets. It also made its way into French literature about werewolves in particular. So it's a weapon you use against werewolves. And there's some truth to this metaphor because indeed we're dealing with a very complex phenomenon that mutates, maybe has a different shape in the dark than it has in the light. But I have to tell you, silver bullets don't actually work because the guys from Mythbusters, I don't know if you remember this from TV, they just tested them out and they found out they are less accurate and much slower than regular lead bullets. So I'm actually very glad we don't have a silver bullet because if all you have is a silver bullet, then every problem is a werewolf. So I'd like to conclude with this. And I'd like to end with a warm thank you, first for the panelists, for Dennis, Raimonda, Koen, Michael, Ksenia, and Philip, but then also my own colleagues, because a lot of effort goes into these events. You just see me coming here and thanking everybody. But behind the scenes, we have Joris and the whole team from communications who do their best to facilitate all of this, to set up these meetings. Our moderators, Julia and Wouter, who put a lot of time also into the script and into finding all the participants. And my colleagues who you don't see in here, but they're downstairs, who made all of this happen, including the lovely reception that you're about to have. So please, one last round of applause for all these people who made this happen. Thank you.